Welcome back, y'all. Right here I'm just tacking up the next four-way billet, picking up where we left off. This one is combining 4 sets of those stars, and I'm just putting that big fat tack in the middle on the edges and putting that nice heavy handle back on. I've just been cutting it off and reusing it throughout a lot of this whole process of building this mosaic. It's 3/4 inch square. That's been really nice. Have a quick look at the end of it there. You can see how that is. They don't need middle tacks because they're big heavy chunks. They're not going to bow upon heating. Going to dunk it in some oil. Again, not strictly necessary, but I find it helps a little bit. Just get slightly cleaner edge seams, a little less grinding necessary. Doesn't have any of the drawbacks of using a borax flux. And going into the forge. Let me get this out of the way. Yes, the camera is still shaking a lot. Yes, it's difficult to deal with. Yes, I'm working on it. I got some new equipment in, and I actually have managed to pretty much iron it all out as of today. However, this is a few day old footage at this point, so we're just going through the last of the hammer footage that has a bad shake to it. And then once we get to the next chapter after this, we'll start seeing some hammer work that is nice and steady, which I am happy to report. But thanks everyone for letting me know in the comments. It has motivated me to really kind of dig and figure out how to get past this, because that whole floor shakes, even with the amount of concrete that I have under both hammers. So right here we're just getting that weld. We are knocking it down in size. The 4-way welds usually do just fine. No separation on the seams. It's not a weld I typically have any real difficulty with. Some other welds, and I will note what they are as we go through them, I take a little bit more caution with. But on this one, usually I'll do a fairly long first heat and get the weld and then start just knocking it down in size. Always when I go for a second heat, I'm going to soak it a little bit first just to get that cross weld boundary grain growth that really makes it a homogeneous piece of steel. I call it aging the welds. But right here you can see we're cooling down. I don't like to forge it very cool anyway. I mean, it's a waste of effort. Harder on the hammer, harder on everyone, myself included. You can also see that the further the tripod gets from the hammer, the less shake there is from the floor. So in the future, another strategy of mine is just going to be keep the tripod farther away from the hammer in known good spots, and then if I need a closer shot, just zoom to get it. And I'm including this to mollify those of you who are made motion sick by my hammer portions of my videos, but also just to kind of contribute, if I can, to other makers who are also maybe trying to iron out how to get the hammer shake out of their footage. I know I've learned some from some of you guys, so it's always a give and take. You got anything that works better, let me know in the comments. Somebody said that putting a folded welding glove under each of the tripod legs has helped them, and actually I think that's what I'm doing here. It has helped significantly. I've moved on from that method, but I'm using a similar method I'll talk about in the future. Anyway, here we are, just stretching out at this point to get our length for another chop and 4-way. And I'm trying, I'm keeping it square, building crisp corners, and then building the length that I want. Typically, I like to be at about 4 inches per piece, give or take, for a recombination after cutting. So that's what we're getting here. Now just going to the long axis, finish getting all the corners nice and crisp. Try to build as even of a thickness from both directions throughout the bar. That way less grinding, less distortion on the next recombination. Another thing I find is that continuing to forge at these lower temperatures as a finishing heat really helps with the amount of grinding you have to do to get the scale off. Because right now I'm at a heat where I'm not forming scale anymore, but I am still forging the surface of the billet more even and true. So if I can do that without forming any more scale, I'm popping off what scale there was, it's falling off the die, and then I'm planishing a smooth surface after that. So really very little grinding after a heat like this is necessary on the surface grinder to get my next re-weldable surface, typically about 10 thousandths or so. Always got to sight down the bar a little there. It never comes off the dies perfectly flat. There's always a little cup to it one way or another. And I try to correct by hand as necessary. Again, just to reduce grinding, conserve material, improve pattern with less distortion. We had gotten a nice clean result on that bar. I went away, let it cool down, did some other stuff midday. Coming back here, just kind of looking it over. I'm going to mark it out with the tape here, obviously, and a pen for another 4-piece cut. And at this point I'm using the bandsaw. It gets truer cuts and it wastes less material in a kerf. And I'm not using a stop with the saw, so I am marking each one of the cuts here carefully. All the same, I still do always check it before going to cut it up. Because again, there's nothing worse than having a 1/4 inch more or less material on one or a couple of your pieces. Sure makes you feel like a bonehead, and it wastes material, which at this point is quite precious. I mean, you've seen the amount of work that I put into it so far. And there's going to be a fair amount of work into it still. And I got to make 2 big blades out of this, so I can't be losing enough that I have to make one of those blades smaller or build up another block. Can't be having that. And I think what happened there was I checked what I had just marked out, didn't like it, tumbled the bar 90 degrees. Now I'm remarking it. And then you'll see that when I'm done with my remarks here and checking it, I will tumble to the original face and just kind of make a scrawl across that face with my marker so I know that that is the marks to be ignored. Very important to do that. Thought I'd give you a little glimpse of bandsaw life again. Spent a lot of time sitting in the seat right here, babysitting this saw and spraying coolant. I'm in the market for a better used saw. Love to get me an Ellis saw or something, but boy, a Marvel saw would be amazing as well. Heck, even a little bit bigger and stiffer of like a Dual or something with better guides would be amazing. But this one has done a lot of good work for me as well. Figured I'd speed this up. Nobody wants to watch a bandsaw cut in real time. I'll be amazed if you guys sit here and watch it cut in 6 times speed. But some of you guys that might like to actually see the bladesmiths among you, just my process of feeding the bar through. You can see I don't even like reset the feed. I just pick it up enough to where I have time to reset the piece in the vise before the blade is down to the work again. Figure it's just excess wear on the feed mechanism if I'm adjusting it 2, 3 times, 4 times as much as necessary throughout a cut up. Somebody suggested I show the blade welding procedure. Well, I'll probably show the next one. I did weld this blade by hand with my welder, not with a bandsaw blade welder. And it seems to be holding up well. All the same, you can see me holding the saw bow there in case the blade catches or pops off or something happens. And we're done. Finally. And let's get that billet stub off of there. I'm gonna go abrasive chop saw that off the handle, off camera, and regrind the end so I can weld it to the next billet. It's one of the little unglamorous tasks that just fill up large parts of the day on this type of work. So deburring here, but I'm also grinding the ends nice and flat, getting the entire saw cut marks off. Here I'm using a 36 grit ceramic belt, Broadbeck Ironworks 2x72 grinder. Very nice grinder. I'm definitely Team Broadbeck all the way. Great guys. They came and visited me and made some Damascus. And Ryan and Vince, check them out. They're great guys. Great product. The belt I'm using is a VSM 36 grit ceramic XK885Y. I found those work the best for my machines and the style of grinding that I do. Again, just deburring, getting all the ends, saw cuts off at 36, and then switching to an XK885Y 120 grit ceramic VSM belt, just to get the scratch pattern even a little bit better, because I'm prepping the ends here for a check etch, and I want to really see what's going on in there, because at this point in the game we are always check etching our pattern before recombining to see what needs to connect to what. And looks like I'm just about done here. Yep. Just a little jar of fairly strong ferric chloride. I kind of etch both ends back and forth and back and forth. That way it takes a little less time than if I pay attention to each end separately. Just got to leave the etchant on there long enough that I can see what's going on in the end of the bar. And after this, I think off camera I'll go squirt it down with some water outside. Then come over here, use first a dirty rag, blot most of the water off. Then in my hierarchy of rags, I go to a slightly cleaner rag, blot the last of the water off, get the ends dry. And now I can already see what's going on with the pattern. But I want to make sure there's no residual moisture, because the pattern will start to funk up and disappear on you if you leave it damp and it kind of like colors up again. And then I'm just putting a little machine oil on a paper towel, which finishes preventing the ends from recoloring up, helps me see the pattern just a little bit better while I'm adjusting everything and making sure that lines connect the way that I need them to and things like that. And let's have a look here. Okay, so you can see there's a little bit of aging left to do on those welds. There's still a few ghost lines, but things are pretty well connected in the end of the billet there. And we'll get a closer look here in a sec. We have etched all of the ends of our billet that's been cut into 4 chunks to see what the pattern inside looks like. So there you can see it. We have compass roses in a grid diagonally, and little fireballs at between the connection points. We've got kind of a secondary pattern look, which is almost like a 4-petaled flower with fireballs in the center of the petals. So it's one of those fun things where geometrically it'll have a different aspect that jumps out at you depending on what shapes you see first, which I kind of enjoy. At any rate, etching the pattern allows us to see that it's somewhat asymmetrical within each block. Like this right here is a little bit farther to this side of the center of this flat, and so it's very important at this step, if you want your pattern to look okay and matched up, to really etch the ends of everything and mate everything up, flip blocks around until you can get everything to meet how it should. Then your pattern is going to look a lot better than if you just chop it and don't inspect anything before you recombine it. At any rate, I am pretty happy with the look of this so far, and I think this is going to be our last combination. After this, we're going to forge it to our blade stock size, and then also forge a separate billet, I believe, of W's, coarse W's, to twist for an edge bar on each piece. Sure, a lot of hammer time in this work, but if you compare it to the amount of time that you would spend on a hydraulic forging press to do a comparable amount of work, and the resultant material loss, comparative material loss you'd have, I'm very much a power hammer guy. There are still some things that I would love to have a bigger press for, and I am going to build one. I've got a bunch of the parts and a hydraulic power unit collected for a 40 horsepower, like 100-ton fast single-stage press. I just don't have the electrical service to my shop yet to make that happen. I have been talking to the PUD, and I've done some of the work towards installing true 3-phase from the grid, but I still got some change to pony up, so it'll be a couple of years. I'm going to extend my shop first. Anyway, so we got our weld. We're going to go back in for a reheat. And I think this will be the last clip of this video. We're just going to stretch this thing out. And actually, right here, that was our last recombination. So we've actually built the finished main mosaic pattern for the integral bolo knife and later the machete. And now I'm actually going to concern myself with drawing it out to the finished dimension that I want for tiling. So you're going to see me here start concentrating on one side of the billet more than the face 90 degrees to that, because usually I'll go into tiling with a heavy rectangular cross section, and then the tiles will be cut and flipped out so that the wider section of the billet becomes the flats of the blade, if that makes sense. These are both going to be big, wide blades, and so I pre-distort the pattern from one direction so that after I cut those tall and somewhat narrower tiles out, flip them flat, and then forge weld them and draw them a bit, the pattern will be stretched back to basically a square pattern reveal per tile. I'm basically doing some pre-forging to allow them to get stretched back out square, if that makes sense. I'll babble about it a little bit more in subsequent tiling videos and stuff, and you'll be able to kind of picture it better once I actually am cutting some tiles and flipping them out, and can kind of describe the theory behind this if you haven't gotten it already. Anyway, I'm being very careful at this point to build 90-degree corners, no parallelogram shape to it, and then very crisp corners. I need very little scale, very crisp corners, very 90-degree corners, and very even thickness throughout the bar, because you need a high-quality bar and surface to be able to cut and flip out tiles with minimal waste and best results in terms of pattern connection and everything like that. So thanks for staying with me this far, suffering through the shock in my hammer clips. That's going to get better, I promise you. And actually on the next section, we'll be working on building the W's bar for the edge and possibly the fittings of these blades. Y'all have seen W's built before, but this gets a little bit more into W's theory, and maybe you'll enjoy having a look at that. So please do stay tuned for next time, and I'll see y'all down the road. Thanks for watching.